All right, good morning, everybody. So glad to see so many of you here, and thank you to the Refuge Center for inviting me to come speak. This section is going to be all about first responder behavioral health. So when we talk about first responders, we're really talking about any group of person that is going to respond to an emergency. So in my purview, that type of first responder is typically the one that's on the street. Firefighters, law enforcement of any kind, EMS, dispatchers, they work with us as well. But this can also apply to the first responders that respond to emergencies, maybe in a more controlled setting, like doctors, nurses, etc. So first responders can really apply to any of those groups. So part of why Refuge asked me to come speak on this subject is because I have kind of a unique point of view with this subject of several different vantage points. So I'm a first responder myself. I'm the wife of a firefighter, and I also work in a peer support capacity with a whole bunch of first responders, police, and fire, as well as their families. So I'm kind of coming at this topic from lots of different viewpoints. So my hope is that in this time we have together, there will be a takeaway for anybody. Whether you are a first responder yourself, whether you love a first responder and you have one at home that you want to take care of, or you have a desire or heart to support them however way that you can, hopefully there will be a takeaway for you as well. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit better and tell you a little bit about my story. So I think our stories are really, really, really important. And I think it's important that we share them because we all have one, right? We all have our own walk of life that we've been living. And I think the pieces of that can be applied to other people in a very powerful way if we choose to share them. So I want to encourage you guys to do that as well with the people in your circle, is share your story. So I'm going to share a little bit about mine. So my name is Emily Nelms. I work for the Franklin Fire Department, and my title is fire engineer. So for anyone not familiar with that terminology, I don't build anything, but I drive and operate a fire truck. So I work out in Cool Springs on Ladder 3, so if you see us out there, wave at us. We'll wave back, hopefully. So that's what I do for a living. I've been with Franklin for 6 years, and I have been in the fire service as a whole for 13. I put this slide together with all of these pictures because I want you to get to know me a little bit as we go through this, but I also want to paint a picture that I am a whole person, right? So I'm a first responder, I am a firefighter, I have been for a long time, and that's reflected up here, right? You see the badge that says Franklin Fire Department. So that's a huge part of who I am. That's not all that I am. And I think that's an important piece of the puzzle for all of us. I think when you are in a helping profession, so whether you're a first responder, you're in therapy, you're a social worker, you work in human services of any kind, we can get lost in that. We can pour ourselves so fully into helping other people that we somehow become less ourselves. And I can just tell you that when that happens, when what your work is becomes your sole identity or your primary identity, that is heavy. That is a heavy place to be. It can feel really, really lonely. And so I think it's important for health and for healing that we all find and we identify and we focus on who else we are. We pour ourselves into our careers and helping others, but who we are outside of that is important too. So to introduce myself, I'm a Christian. I'm a wife to Daniel. I am a mama to baby Noah. He's 3 months old. I am a dog mama to Jackson. I love him. That's my best friend. Jackson is my best friend. And then in this picture down here, this was our wedding photo. This reflects that I am a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm Aunt Emmy to a whole bunch of small people. So yes, I am a firefighter, and yes, you are who you are at work, but you are so much more. And I want to encourage you to remember that and to find that and hold on to that. And also, if you have a first responder in your life, remind them of that because maybe they don't remember. So I decided I wanted to be in the fire service when I was a small child. It's pretty cool to grow up to be the thing that you wanted to be when you were a kid, right? So I was around the firehouse growing up. I saw the laughter. I saw the jokes. I saw the hard work. I saw the family atmosphere. It's a brotherhood, right? That's what they say is a brotherhood. I was told you get to help people, you get to save people, you get to run lights and sirens, which you do, which is super fun. Just super fun. And all of that has grown up to be true. I have big brothers, I have little brothers, I have crazy uncles in the firehouse. Those are true. I do run lights and sirens. I've had the privilege to help people. I've had the ultimate privilege to actually save lives. That is, nothing compares to it. However, I think that there is another side of it that we don't necessarily talk about. There is a darker side of what we do as first responders that, isn't necessarily a part that's pitched to you when you sign up for these things. There are some low lows that go along with those high highs. There's those challenging runs that despite your best efforts, you're not able to help someone, you're not able to save someone, you're not even really making a difference for them. First responders see some of the worst things in life, right? They see what human beings are capable of. We see trauma, we see grief, we see death in all forms, up close and personal. And it's not just once, it's not twice, it's over and over and over again for years, for decades, for the course of a career. You just are faced with these things again and again and again. And that can take its toll. So several years into my career, my exposures to these things started to take a toll on me. I had one particularly challenging season. Anyone ever had one of those times where when it rains, it pours, where it's just like, oh my goodness, give me a break kind of a thing? And so it was happening again and again. And I started to notice changes in myself, which I share this part because first responders might not have the language for what they're going through. They might not have the understanding of how to communicate things, or they might not even recognize it at first until they get down the road to where they're a little bit far past. So I realized that I was starting to change. Where I'm usually energetic and happy-go-lucky, I was angry. I was carrying around a lot of anger. I was struggling with debilitating anxiety. I was withdrawing into myself, not communicating with other people, not doing things that I enjoy. I wasn't showing up well at home. I wasn't showing up well at work. And at the time, I was in a leadership position. And I wondered, if I say something, if I tell people that I'm struggling, or that I can't handle what I'm doing or what I'm seeing, are they going to trust me? Am I going to lose my position? Are the people around me going to trust me to do my job? Those were real concerns that I had, and still in the back of my mind, sometimes I wonder, right? So that's something that first responders think about is, if I admit this, is this going to take away from my job and the impact that I can make? So I wondered about those things. I knew something was wrong, but I really didn't have the words for it. And even if I had the words, there was no place for me to go. So several years ago, this was really not a conversation that was happening. So I didn't know where to turn. So as a result, I just did what I had to do to get by for years. And that was really tough. That's unfortunately the case for many first responders, is they just do what they have to do to get by until that doesn't work anymore. And the result is, miserable lives, failed marriages. There are a lot of first responders who are on marriage number 2, number 3, number 4. It results in strained relationship with children, loved ones, substance use. There is a widespread substance abuse problem amongst first responders because we're trying to handle it on our own. Premature ends to careers. A lot of us walk away from this calling that we have, this purpose that we have, because we just don't have the resources to help. And then unfortunately, as Amy mentioned, and as Chief Faulkner is going to mention, suicide is a very prevalent issue amongst first responders as well. So fortunately, my story didn't end the way that others do. I had an intervention, and I was able to connect with the help that I needed that was specific to me. And ever since then, it's been my mission to make sure that nobody else feels that way, that everybody has a place to go when they need a place to go. So I went back to school. I got my master's degree in crisis response and trauma. Yeah, I see you back there. Yeah, I went and got my degree just to learn as much as I can. So I have a non-licensure counseling degree, so not at all where you guys are. So hopefully my real world experience will intersect with your clinical experience, and we can be a rock star team, right? So I went and did that, and then we have been building a behavioral health and wellness program for the City of Franklin first responders, for police and fire, and it's really taken off. So I'm super thankful for that, and that's actually how I got connected with Refuge Center. But all that to be said, first responder behavioral health is a pretty new area. We started studying the military and impacts of the military on people several years back, and we've learned a lot of things. They're just now starting to branch into first responders, to do studies, to look at things like this. What makes us unique? What about our jobs? What about our roles plays into our health, our physical health, our mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, all of these things that make us whole people. So we're going to take a look at that today. We're going to talk about what barriers exist, because there was such a long period of time where it wasn't talked about. We've got a lot of barriers that we've got to break down if we're going to help these people in our lives or, in a clinical setting. So we'll talk about that. And maybe brainstorm some ways that we can connect with and better serve these people that really might need some help. So for many years, behavioral health was not addressed at all as in first responders. So the general attitude, and I guarantee if you asked any first responder in your life if they've ever heard somebody tell them to suck it up, they're going to say yes. That is what you hear, right? That's the narrative. We hear things all the time like, if you can't handle it, find another job. You know what you signed up for. And to me, those statements are obviously unhelpful, right? But they're also not true. That just because something was hard for you and you saw something that weighed on you, weighed on your heart and weighed on your soul, doesn't mean you can't do your job. To say you know what you signed up for, again, I think is nonsense, because there's some things in life that you can't truly understand until you're in it, until you see it, you feel it, you smell it, you touch it. There's a lot of things that you just have to learn by experience. So to know when you sign that piece of paper that I want to be a fireman, you don't know exactly what that's going to look like down the road. So these narratives have been prevalent, and we are actively fighting them. And I want you guys to help me fight these narratives as well, because they're just simply not true. When we respond to an emergency incident, when something is really bad, right, there is a certain amount of dissociation that has to happen. We have to take a step back. We have to put our feelings aside, shove them out of the way, whatever the case may be, so we can do our jobs, right? We have a unique skill set to make sense out of chaos when other people can't, right? When it's really bad, you call us and we fix it. What by all means necessary, we're gonna put a Band-Aid on it, right? So in order to do that, we have to take a step back, dissociate a little bit, or a lot of it sometimes, and do our job to the best of our ability. Unfortunately, a lot of first responders never take that step back forward. They take it back, they push it wherever they push it aside, and they never look at it again. So me, coming from my background, I like to think of the brain like a filing cabinet. Stick with me. It's like a filing cabinet. So you go on these incidents, you go on these trauma calls or whatever the case may be. You take that piece of paper and you just shove it in that filing cabinet. Any old which way, just get it in there and shut the door, right? Over time, you file and you file and you file and you file, but there's no sense of organization. They're all in there, all any which way. Maybe the door's not really closing anymore because they're just kind of shoved in there. And there might be a time where you go to open that door to put another one in, and it all just comes back out at you. So what we need to do, what we need to learn to do, and what we need help doing is figure out how to organize in a logical way. That when we go on these incidents, yes, we take a step back, but we also step into it in the appropriate time. So when we're back at the firehouse, when we're back surrounded by our peers, when we're with our family, when we're in a therapy setting, to look at these things, to address the emotions that we feel, to process through however that looks and file it in the appropriate place to where hopefully it doesn't come back out at you. So we are not made to see the things that we see and do, right? I think that a lot of the stuff that we encounter is just not made for human eyes, but somebody has to. Somebody has to see it, somebody has to help. So it's important that we talk to first responders that the reactions that they have when they have them are normal, that they're normal human responses to abnormal circumstances, that it doesn't make you less of a person, it doesn't make you less of a first responder. In order to productively and healthfully move forward, we have to acknowledge some of the feelings that we have. So learning how to do that is vital. So we need to learn that no matter how we feel or how we respond to these kind of incidents, it's okay. And we might need some other people to tell us that. So keep that in mind. So we went from unaddressed, largely unaddressed, to more of a reactive form. So critical incident stress debriefings, those sorts of things where when something bad happens, a bad incident or somebody dies, one of our own dies, whatever that looks like, we come together and we debrief and we do the best that we can with something that's already happened. And that's a good thing. We got to continue to do that. But we want to branch farther into proactive. This is the direction that we're heading. This is what Refuge Center is helping us do. This is what our program is all about, is proactive behavioral health. So how do we help people before there's a crisis, before their marriage is in trouble, before they don't have a relationship with their children, before depression, before PTSD, before all of these issues that we're facing? How do we get ahead of it? So that's our mission. So let's talk some first responder considerations. So what causes first responder stress? Of course, normal life challenges, right? We all have finances, we have home responsibilities, we have marriages, we have children, we have all of these different things that just make us human, right? Everybody in this room can stand up and say, yeah, I've got that issue too. So we've got all of those that we're contending with. But we also have a whole list of things that pertain specifically to being a first responder. So incident response, or response at a moment's notice. No matter what we're doing, where we are, whether we're eating, we're sleeping, whatever the case is, when the tone goes off, we get up and we go. And that's a pretty heavy mental thing that we have to contend with. To wake up from a dead sleep to now I'm driving $1 million truck down the road. That's bananas when I stop and think about it. But that's part of what is weighing on us and causing our bodies physical and mental stress. Unpredictable calls or a lack of sufficient information. What we know about the incident that we're going to is just what's told to the dispatcher on the phone, and they relay to us. So there's usually a lot of information that we just don't know ahead of time. So we show up and we have to figure it out on the fly. Required life or death decisions. Responsibility for self and others. A lot of the time, the decisions that we make are quite literally, in that moment, life or death. I'm safe, I'm not safe. We're going home, we're not going home. And that is a heavy burden to bear, not only for yourself, but for the community and the people around you. So those kind of things weigh on us. Lack of adequate decompression time. So this kind of goes back to saying that eventually we need to look at these things. When it's run after run after run after run, when do you have that decompression time? So you might be talking with a first responder that just hasn't decompressed from a multitude of runs because they just didn't have time, right? They kept going at work, and then they went home and they had to handle their home responsibilities. So they might be carrying a whole lot of things. It might not just be one, but an accumulation. And then unsuccessful transitions from work to home. So this is something that I really encourage my peers to do, is think about that transition, that at work, you're a firefighter, and this is what's expected of you. But at home, your mom, your dad, your husband, your whoever you are there, they can be very different things. And it's hard for us sometimes to step in to home life when we've just been dealing with so much chaos, or we're carrying really heavy burdens. And sometimes it's really hard to have a conversation with somebody when you go home that really might not understand. We'll get into that a little bit later, but the number one question that we get asked when we go out in public, or we're dealing with people in our lives that aren't first responders, is, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? That's a genuine curiosity question that comes from people, but that is really hard on the heart, right, to think that through. So, those kind of things, that transition from work to home, we've got to help people successfully navigate that to where they can show up well, and they can show up healthy and focused and determined in both areas. So some other job-specific stressors is shift work. So we work 24 hours. Law enforcement works a shorter period of time, but their shorter period of time is really intense a lot of the time, right? They're in their car, they're driving around, they're doing whatever they're doing as far as law enforcement, and they have to be on 100% of the time, especially in 2023, with the way things are for law enforcement. It doesn't shut off, right? They always have to be on guard because you never know. For us, working 24-hour shifts, some work 48s, you're gone for a long period of time, and you have to be, no matter what, even if, kind of jumping into the sleep situation, even if I got a full night of sleep at the firehouse, it's not really a full night of sleep, because my mind is always going of what could happen. So our bodies consciously won't let us get into that deep sleep. So those long hours can be really tough, especially if you haven't slept. Impact of your schedule at home. We miss ball games, we miss recitals, we miss whatever it is that we're missing at home. And that's not only hard on us, but our families. If any of you are married to a first responder, or you have a loved one that's a first responder, it's really hard to see them not come home for the things that are important. But we got that balancing act of doing what we need to do at work, but also balancing at home. And so that weighs on everybody. That's a challenge for everybody. If you know a first responder, it's probably impacted you as well. Poor lifestyle habits. We're on the go. We're not eating very well. We're probably not sleeping very well. So that's part when we get into things that we can do to help. Lifestyle habits, encouraging them to have these good, healthy habits, and building a strong foundation at home. Physical danger. Injuries, the threat of death, cancer. Cancer weighs really heavy on the minds of firefighters and EMTs and police officers that are going into certain situations. So that's something that's just sort of underlying, probably in the back of their mind. So if you're helping them, you're working with them, just know that threat exists there. And then the frequent and repeated exposure to trauma. I touched on this before. But there was a study that was published back in 2021 that polled firefighters in particular, and 90% of them reported one major trauma incident in a year. So 90% went to one super significant thing. So not just your, I say this kind of flippantly, but I don't mean it that way. Just give me some grace there. But your ordinary runs that involve traumas or deaths or things like that, that's just everyday stuff, right? One really major incident a year, with the average reporting being 6. So you talk about 6 major critical incidents in a year. That's a heavy load to carry. So because of that, the frequency, intensity of these traumatic exposures, there's a lot of incidents of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, substance use, suicide. All of these things come from that. But the thing that I want to always stress to the people that I work with, the people that I'm working with in a peer support capacity, and the thing that I want you guys to remember, especially as helping professionals yourself, is that there's always post-traumatic growth that can happen. Post-traumatic growth, if you're not familiar with this term, I highly encourage you to look it up and really see what's going on with this, because this is the positive changes that come as a result of struggling with challenging circumstances. Okay, so post-traumatic growth could be a greater respect for life. It could be a better relationship with your family. It could look in the form of standing up in front of a room and talking about behavioral health because you made it, right? You survived, you're healthy, you're doing well. So this is my post-traumatic growth, is standing up here. And so this is 100% possible for the first responders that you're working with, the first responders in your lives. We just have to figure out what that looks like for that individual. So I would make the argument that growth is not only possible, but it's likely. So the way I look at this is all about contrast. Okay, so if every single day you woke up and you went outside and the sun was shining, then you probably wouldn't really notice the sun. You wouldn't really have an appreciation for it. Oh, it's sunny again. I've put on my short sleeve shirt and go on about my business. However, if every day it was raining, if every single day, rain after rain after rain after rain, and you wake up one morning and the sun is shining, you're like, man, look at the sun. Right? The sun's out, you appreciate it, it feels good on your skin. You might mention it to somebody, it might come up in conversation, like, hey, aren't you glad the sun's out? So you notice it. It's the same thing with trauma. It's the same thing with carrying heavy burdens day after day after day, no matter what helping profession that you're in, is if you see, if you experience challenges, and that's the majority of what you see, when the good comes, you're gonna notice it, and you're gonna appreciate it a little bit better if you make the conscious intention to do so. Okay, so that's my argument, is that it's likely for us that we can have such a great appreciation because we've seen what sadness looks like, we've seen what grief looks like, we've seen what hurt looks like. And so when love and happiness and joy comes around, man, it's like the sun shining on your face, right? So encourage them that the narrative that's often perpetuated now that these studies are coming out and we're talking about first responder health and we're getting these statistics. I love statistics, but sometimes they are hard to hold, right? So knowing such and such percentage of people will have this issue, that is good to know, but that's not it, right? That's not where we stop. We know that there's something beyond that, and so we have to recognize it and we have to address it, but man, the sun is back there, and it's gonna rise, it's gonna come up in the morning. So if there's somebody that's having a hard time seeing that, remind them. So some barriers. So we go back to that attitude, that culture that we're trying to really overcome. So part of first responder culture is a high esteem of strength and self-reliance, right? I'm a helper. I don't need help. Farthest thing from the truth, but that's what we believe, right? Like I can handle this, right? I don't want to ask for help because then everybody's going to think I'm weak. Perception and pride, right? These things are very real barriers that exist in our minds because we just truly think that we can't ask for help sometimes. There's things like fear of judgment, right? Fear of consequences, like I talked about in my own story, is, am I going to lose my position? Are people going to trust me? Lack of access and availability to appropriate help, right? There's a lot of stuff that first responders see and do that are very specific, and they need a specific kind of help. So the more we can educate, the more we can inform, the more we can build a team of people who are prepared to deal with some of this complex trauma that happens over the course of decades, from all different varieties of trauma, the better. Some of them have had negative experiences with therapy in the past, and so just getting them in the door is a big deal to try it again. Lack of knowledge surrounding treatment. A lot of us just know what we see in the movies, right? Really big couch, you gotta lay down and you gotta have this whole conversation about your feelings, and then we hold hands, and you've seen movies, right? You know what I'm talking about. That's what these people think that therapy is. And so part of my mission is to say, no, it doesn't have to be like that. It can just be a conversation, right? You can go in and you can just, conversate with people about things. Tell them what's going on in your mind. Have an unbiased third party to tell you that you're not alone, or that whatever you're feeling makes sense. So we might need to work together to be able to, one, educate them on what it could really look like, but then also provide ways for them to get treatment that doesn't look like the big couch where they lay down, right? Maybe meet them where they are. Some of the therapists that work with our program will go have coffee with somebody, in a public place and all of that, but just go have a cup of coffee. We love coffee. We love caffeine, right? So we're adrenaline junkies, which is a whole nother part. But we love caffeine, so maybe you'll meet us for a cup of coffee. Maybe have some video conference, maybe have some texting back and forth, however that looks. I think it's important that we both educate, but we provide things that it's going to meet them where they are and make them more comfortable in order to share what they need to share. So Paul Combs, he's an artist, and he truly has a pulse on the American Fire Service like nobody else. Look him up if you're interested. No matter what the issue is, he has drawn a cartoon about it, and they're spot on. But when we start talking about first responders, these are some of the things that I think we should look at. We've been told that we're difficult. We're difficult. We're difficult to treat. We're difficult to support. And part of that is just who we are as people. We're very type A. We're default aggressive. We're hard chargers. We're confident, we're achievers, we fix things, right? So we want to get in and we want to get out. That's what we want. And so when we show up in a therapist's office, we're like, all right, let's do this. Right? It doesn't really work like that sometimes. So we gotta slow down and really get to the root of things and kind of uncover things layer by layer by layer. And that's not us, right? So we can be difficult. We're project-oriented. I don't know how many times I've told a first responder that's struggling is, you are not a project. Like, there is not an end date on this. Like, getting healthy is a lifelong process. So just calm down. So, there's things like that we need to contend with. Instant gratification goes right along with that. And that's something that I really want to emphasize, is that this is the world that we live in, is instant results. Right? You call 911, we show up, we fix it. In Franklin, the average response time is 3 to 5 minutes. If you call 911, you will have a fire truck in 3 to 5 minutes is what we aim for to help you with whatever the problem is. And so when we're ready for help, and usually by the time we ask for it, we're pretty far down the line, right? We've come to the conclusion that we need help, and we need help right now. So be aware of that if there's a first responder that's asking for help, they're probably over here somewhere. And then simultaneous work and healing. I think this one's a really important one, because while we are actively dealing with these traumas, we're also actively still working and dealing with other traumas. And so I know there's a lot of treatment modalities that work from the perspective of let's break it down, let's really look at what it looks like, and then let's build back up. Well, sometimes that doesn't work for us when we still have to actively function and work and support our families. Sometimes it's to that point where we need to just step back. We need to take somebody off the truck, take them off the street, whatever it looks like, to really do some productive healing. But for a lot of us, it's just a matter of working at the same time. And so balancing that from a clinician standpoint is important, that we can still continue to function and do our jobs at a high level, because every time we respond, we have to be at the highest level possible. Humor. I dedicated a whole slide to humor. Yes, a whole slide to humor, because that is probably our number one way of dealing with the things that we see. If you can laugh about it, man, that releases some pressure, right? They say that laughter is the best medicine, and it's true. If you can laugh about something, if you can find the humor, you're going to go a long way. Unfortunately, some of the stuff that we're laughing about is not really funny, and we've gotten in a lot of circumstances where we have made jokes to people who are not in our world, and it has been received very poorly. Even in a therapist's office, if we say something that is totally off the wall and you're like, holy cow, like, where did that come from? This is a desperate cry for help. It might be, right? We might be using humor as a way to mask it. Another thing that we've realized is that sometimes people avoid talking to us about certain things because we can joke about it. They're obviously doing okay because they've laughed, they've made a joke, so we're not going to address this piece. But a lot of times that's farthest from the truth. The things that we're joking about are oftentimes the things that we need to address the most. So don't let humor get in the way of serving if that seems like something that needs to be addressed. So as well, I mentioned healthy habits, that a lot of our major stress comes from poor lifestyle habits. And so this is something that I really preach with the people in peer support is, let's look at our habits and let's look at the whole person, because everybody in here, we have physical selves, mental selves, emotional selves, spiritual selves. We are whole people. And if we're going to be healthy, happy humans, we have to look at all of those pieces. And so when we're looking at healthy habits and we're helping people identify where areas of weaknesses are, let's look at the whole person, okay? So we talk about nutrition. There is plenty of studies that show that processed foods lead to mental health complications, that the dyes and the artificial sweeteners and the inflammatory oils, they have a real tangible effect on our physical bodies that manifests itself in mental ways, right? It affects our brain. So nutrition, sleep is, I usually get a laugh from first responders when I'm like, sleep better. They're like, okay, how do I do that on shift? Well, there's ways that you can maximize the sleep that you are getting, right? Dark environments, when you go home, make it a point, go to bed early, don't be on your cell phone, those kind of things. So try to help them find ways to get good quality sleep. Get in the sunshine, get in fresh air. Really look at these healthy habits that we all know we should be doing and encourage them to figure out what that looks like for them. And then tap into those inherent potential protective factors that we have, right? Connection with other people. We're all made for connection. We all need to be needed, and we need other people. So on the job, encourage them to talk to peer support. Most of us are most comfortable talking to our peers anyway. Off the job, connect with your family. Help them figure out ways to share without oversharing, right? How do we talk about this with people who don't truly understand, but where we can still have that back and forth and have a relationship? By all means necessary, discourage isolation. If you see isolation, we're going to talk about suicide later in the morning, but that is a key component, is isolation, and we are really good at that. When we start to struggle, we withdraw, and it causes serious problems. And then that sense of purpose, tap into that. Tap into the things that make them drive, right? That they get to help people, that they get to save people. And while that's not every day, it happens, and it is wonderful when it happens. So help them see that. So as I wrap up here, right on time, I've got a couple of books that I want to recommend to you. That were really, really pivotal for me. So first one is Healing What's Hidden. So this is the practical steps to overcoming trauma, written by the people who do Reboot Recovery. Look that up. Phenomenal organization for trauma, for military, for first responders. They've put out this book. And then the other one is Challenges of the Firefighter Marriage. They talk all about essential conversations to have with your loved ones. They talk about all different kinds of life issues, like how to live with us, how to sleep in the same bed with us, sex, raising children, all of these things that we need to focus on. Highly, highly recommend. This was a game changer for myself and my husband. Being a dual firefighter household, we have a whole double set of problems, right? So game changer book. Yeah, that's what I have. Thank you so much. Good to see everybody, and we'll enjoy the rest.